Halo, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Lia Ayu Ashary. I am from Economic Education Class, State University of Jakarta. In here, I want to expand my research about influence of learning intensity and discipline on learning outcomes of class 10 studying in economic lesson at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta. Chapter 1 about preliminary. 1. Background. Education is the main thing and very important for human life. This is because education is a human effort to expand knowledge in order to shape the value, attitudes, behavior, and ethics of each individual. In Law Number 20 of 2003, Article 1, Paragraph 1 emphasizes that education is a conscious and planned effort to create a learning atmosphere and learning process so that students actively develop their potential to have religious spiritual strength, self-control, intelligence, personality, noble character, as well as the skill needed by himself, the community, nation, and state. 3. Education system namely is the 1. Input, 2. Process, and 3. Output. To be able to see the success or failure of the purpose of an education, we can see from the output of education in the form of learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are an ability that students learn, which is marked by change in behavior or behavior after undergoing the learning process. Abdurrahman in 2003 defined learning outcomes as abilities obtained by students after going through learning activities. To be able to achieve learning outcomes in accordance with learning objective can be influenced by several factors, both internal factors and external factors. Number 1, in the internal factors. Internal factors are factors that come from within students without being influenced by outsiders. Internal factors are also one of the dominant factors in learning outcomes. Number 2, external factors. External factors are factors that come from outside its individual that can affect the learning process and learning outcomes. Two topics of internal factor in research. The one, learning intensity, is effort are met with attention and determination in achieving the expected learning goals. 2. Discipline is a form of self-compliance with the rules that apply in the surrounding environment. 2. Formulation of the problem. Number 1. Is there an effect of learning intensity on the learning outcome of Class 10 studying in economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta? 2. Is there an effect of discipline on the learning outcome of Class 10 studying in economic at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta? 3. Is there an effect of learning intensity and discipline together on the learning outcomes of Class 10 studying in economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta? 3. Research purpose. To find out the effect of learning intensity on the learning outcomes of Class 10 studying in economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta. This study aimed to determine the effect of Class 10 students' learning discipline on economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta, and to determine the effect of learning intensity and discipline on the learning outcomes of Class 10 students in economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta. For benefit of results, number 1, theoretical benefits, to add a means of insight into knowledge about education problems, especially the problem of learning intensity and discipline factor that can affect student learning outcomes. Number 2, practical benefit. A. For Senior High School 38 of Jakarta. It can be used as a reference material and reference in improving the quality of student, especially the problem of learning intensity and discipline. B. For Jakarta State University, can be used as a reference material for the Jakarta State University Library and especially the Faculty of Economics Library, and can be used as a means of adding insight in the information and knowledge for the academic community who will conduct research. Chapter 2. Theoretical basis. 1. Grand theory. In this study, research used the grand theory, namely the behavioristic theory, which was coined by Gagne and Berliner, which stated that learning outcomes can be seen from change in behavior as a result of the learning process in the form of experience that have been experienced by each individual. The relationship between behavioristic learning theory and this research is that the acceptance of information in the form of learning outcomes from the knowledge transfer process is not directly accepted by all students. We must go through several steps first. The steps are in the form of factors that affect student learning outcomes, namely internal factor and external factor. In this study, the internal conditions that affect learning outcomes are the intensity of learning and discipline. 2. Conceptual description. A. Learning outcomes. Learning outcomes are achievements that are achieved by everyone after carrying out the learning process. Here are the opinion of the expert. 1. Sujana argues that learning outcomes are changes in student behavior after following the learning process. 2. Abdurrahman argues that learning outcomes are ability obtained after going through learning activities. 1. Learning outcomes criteria. The criteria for measuring student learning outcomes is the level of value that show the level at which the student mastered the material that has been delivered by the teacher and what has been studied. To determine the assessment of student learning outcomes, there are two test techniques, namely is normative test and summative test. 2. Factors affecting learning outcomes. Factors that can affect learning outcomes consist of 1. Internal factors, namely factors that come from within the student themselves, which consists of two aspects, psychological aspect and psychological aspect. 2. External factors, namely factors that come from outside the student themselves, which consists of three aspects. 1. Family environment, school environment, and community environment. 3. Classification of learning outcomes based on Bloom's taxonomy theory expressed by Benjamin Bloom. The classification of learning outcomes can be seen into three domains, namely is 1. Cognitive domain. The cognitive domain is divided into 6 levels, namely knowledge, understanding, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. 2. Affective realm or affective domain. Affective domain is divided into 5 aspects, namely is acceptance, response, respect, realization, and characteristics. 3. Psychomotoric domain. Psychomotoric domain consists of reflex movement, basic movement, perceptual ability, physical abilities, movement skills, and non-discursive communication. B. Learning intensity. According to Shah in Nurris Kasari and Yul Henry, learning intensity is the effort and sincerity of studying in an effort to gain understanding through a process of learning activities that are carried out regularly within a certain time. According to Manurung, the intensity of learning is the student intention, the seriousness of the student, and the frequency of the student in carrying out a business or learning activity, both physically and psychologically, to obtain maximum learning outcomes. 1. Factors that affect the intensity of learning. Factors that affect the intensity of learning consist of: there is a connection with the reality of life, must consider students' personal interests, giving truth and responsibility to students to be active in learning. The material presented must be practical, and there is the role and involvement of students. 2. Types of learning intensity level. 1. High level of learning intensity. 2. Moderate level of learning intensity. And 3. Low learning intensity level. 3. Indicator of learning intensity. 1. Motivation to learn. 2. Study duration. 3. Study frequency. And 4. Learning activity. C. Discipline. Based on the KBBI explains, discipline means order, compliance or obedience to regulation. Then, according to Darmono et al., explaining the meaning of the discipline is a way of self-control or self-direction. Then Hidayatullah explained that discipline is the behavior of someone who follows the rules seriously without external coercion or being intimidated from the outside to be able to submit to the applicable rules. And learning discipline is self-discipline in managing study time at home and having order and self-control at home and at school. In achieving a learning success, it is not only due to the intellectual intelligence of students, but there is an influence from the existence of a disciplined attitude carried out by individuals so as to create order in learning. 1. Discipline goals. A. Based on short term, namely being able to control oneself and get used to being according to the rules that exist anywhere and teach good behavior and not good to do. B. Based on long term, that is being able to control oneself from negative things that are influenced from outside. 2. Discipline function, organizing life together, both personality training, exertion, punishment and sanction, and last, creating a conducive environment. 3. Factors that affect discipline: self-awareness, educator attitude, destination, and environment. Discipline indicator: compliance with school rules, obedience in learning activities in class, adherence to learning activities at home, obedience in doing the tasks. And then relevant previous result. The effect of learning intensity and discipline on social studies learning outcome for MTS and 2 Kediri student. The learning intensity variable has a significant effect on learning outcomes. Then discipline has a significant effect on learning outcomes, and the intensity of learning and the discipline effect jointly affect learning outcomes. 2. The relationship between learning intensity and learning outcome for 5th grade elementary school students. So that there is a significant relationship between learning intensity and learning outcomes. And then theoretical framework. The one, learning intensity. 2, discipline to learning outcomes. And then formulation of the problem. The intensity of learning does not have a significant effect on learning outcomes. However, the intensity of learning has a significant effect on the result study. Discipline does not have a significant effect on learning outcomes. 1, discipline has a significant effect on the result study. The intensity of learning and discipline do not have a significant effect significant to learning outcomes. And then, however, the intensity of learning and discipline have a significant effect on learning outcomes. Chapter 3, Result Method. 1. Result purpose. To obtain knowledge in the form of data can be purpose later will be used as a result in the form of the influence learning intensity and discipline on the learning outcome of class 10 students in economic subject at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta. 2. Place and time result. This result was conducted at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta, with its location at Street Raya Lenteng Agung number 38, RT1 and RW8, Lenteng Agung Village, Jakarta District, South Jakarta City, special region of the capital city of Jakarta. The first result was conducted while the research was carrying out teaching skill practice activities during July 2021 to December 2021. Then the research was continued by distributing questionnaire to all predominant sample, and then collection data in the form of student report card from economic student subject teacher. 3. Research method. Descriptive quantitative research method is a research method that uses data in the form of number as a form of research subject to be studied or as a tool to analyze the knowledge to be solved. The design used in this study is a causality result design which explains the causal relationship between variables. 4. Population and result sample. The population used in this study were all students of class 10 at Senior High School 38 of Jakarta, totaling of 250 students. Then the number of samples required in this study were 154 respondents. 5. Instrument validity and reliability. A. Validity test. Validity test is a test that functions to see whether a measuring instrument is valid or invalid. To determine the validity test, the product moment formula is used. B. Reliability test. Reliability test is a test to determine the extent of the consistency of an instrument that will be used for measuring results. An instrument is said to be reliable, that is, if it produces the same result even though measurements have been made many times. Based on the above formula, the calculation using the Kronberg-Alpha formula is accepted if the calculation account are table 5%. 7. Data collection technique. The one observation, and then documentation, and last questionnaire and questionnaires. 8. Research technique. The research piece consists of planning, implementing, and preparing report. 9. Prerequisites test analysis consists of normality test, linearity test, multicollinearity test, heterodicity test, and autocorrelation test. 10. A path analysis. Path analysis or path analysis is a path that explains the causal relationship between genetic variable of population. 11. Hypothesis testing. The hypothesis is a professional guess on the result answer. The steps used to determine the hypothesis are first, determine the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. Second, determine the type of hypothesis test to start hypothesis testing. And third, perform statistical calculation to determine the level of importance and certainty of the test standard. The type of hypothesis testing consists of the uji test of test and coefficient of determination. 12. Sobel test. Sobel test is a test carried out with the aim of knowing how much strength the indirect influence of the independent variable on the dependent variable is to the mediation variable. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.